Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be covering the Iranian F-14 Tomcat from the Persian Tomcat event that everyone's been flocking to sim for the last couple of weeks, and kind of ruining the game mode in the process as well, but we'll gloss over that for this video because this is actually a really cool plane. So cool in fact that you can't even really fly it right now at its intended BR in the simulator game mode, because like so many other American planes, it can be kind of difficult to find matches for the US team at certain times of the year or so, depending on like what patch cycle in, what plane has been released or whatever, because obviously America only ever gets to be played on one team in sim, because there's no markers or anything, so having America on both sides or having Russia on both sides wouldn't really make any sense because you wouldn't know who's friendly and who isn't. So what ended up happening is everyone's kind of playing this plane right now and there's no slots available on the American team. Now obviously this kind of thing comes and goes in phases, but I think if you're sitting there on the Gaijin marketplace and you're considering actually buying this plane for real money, and you're planning on playing it in sim, this is definitely something that you need to factor into your decision. However, because I'm in Gaijin's big fancy CC program, I of course got this plane a couple of days early, ha ha ha, and I could play around with it before the entire BL bracket kind of went to shit. Now, I gotta admit, I'm not the biggest fan of the other two Tomcats that we currently have in the game sitting in the American tech tree. I never have been, and even though F-14 videos do generally do quite well on YouTube, every time it was time for one, I've always, I started to get a little bit demotivated about the whole YouTube thing, just because I just really don't gel with this plane very well. However, when it comes to this one specifically, even though it's the exact same aircraft, avionics-wise, flight performance-wise, as the F-14A early currently sitting in the American tech tree, my experience with this plane was actually drastically different than what it was for the other one. Obviously, this is because of the weapons package that this thing gets. Everyone knows this. Everyone's already made a video on it. I'm late to the party as usual. It's what the plane was sort of marketed with in the whole event thing as well. You get the Fire DR-27 off of the Tomcat. Oh my god. But of course the main star of the show here is going to be the Fakour-90. Now that isn't the only new missile that you get on this. You also get the Yasser sort of air-to-ground bomb rocket thing. Pretty weird. I don't really know how you're going to be able to use this in sim, but whatever. And of course then you also get the Sedjil. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I think it's called the Hawk in that's like the NATO name for it. Don't bother with it. It's basically just an AIM-7F, but worse in every single way. Now, the Fakour-90 is essentially the Phoenix missile, but it's a lot more usable. So I think you have like a tiny bit less absolute maximum range. The thing travels at like R27 ER speed, so it's not even just like it's slightly faster than the Phoenix. Like the thing is just gone, right? You hit the fire button and thing just moves. Now, if you've ever used the Phoenix missile yourself, or you've watched my last video on the Tomcat or whatever, I go on about it a little bit there. The problem with them is it's not like the max G load per se, but it takes ages for them to actually get up to maneuvering speeds where they have enough grip in the air to sort of pull enough. Have enough traction in the air to actually pull up to those G limits. So in other words, you have to leave the missile for a couple seconds, let it accelerate before it actually can start maneuvering. And this, with the Phoenix, this can take like 10-15 seconds or so, depending on what speed you launch it at. Now the thing with the Fakour-90 is that it gets up to these maneuvering speeds incredibly quickly, so it doesn't take a lot of time. You're not sitting there for 10-15 seconds waiting for the missile to do its thing. You can use it a lot more reactively, if that makes sense, whereas the Phoenix, you would sort of use it a little bit more preventively. Now another thing with this missile is that in sim, situational awareness does come at a little bit of a premium, and when you have a missile that travels twice as fast as basically anything else at this kind of BR, and you can also launch it in TWS mode against, who are you fighting when you're flying America? You're mainly fighting the Russians, which at 12.7, 12.3 mainly use the SPO-15 RWR, which doesn't have the digital display. It doesn't identify what kind of aircraft it is or anything like that. So TWS locks are actually really sneaky. It can be kind of difficult to detect some, especially if there's a lot going on the RWR. And then, for a lot of players, just like suddenly having the thing beep, yeah, they probably have another like 8 or so seconds before the missile actually impacts, depending on the situation. A lot of people at this kind of BR, they're just sort of getting into, let's call it BVR combat or radar missile combat or anything. They're not going to have that instinctive, okay, I need to notch, okay, I need to dive to the ground and multipath now or something like that. So you are actually going to end up getting a lot more kills with this than you might actually expect to when you look at the actual stats of the missile. Basically, if you are firing these things within, let's say, about 15 to 20 kilometers, you are going to catch a lot more people out with the Fakour-90 than you are with something like the Phoenix missile, just because of the reaction times. Now, if you're doing something, you know, like a 50-kilometer shot, 60-kilometer shot, like these super long-range cross-map shots, then the Phoenix is going to be better, because the Phoenix actually has a higher top speed than the Fakour-90. It just takes ages to get there. Now, of course, this also means that the Fakour-90 is really good at these kind of rear aspect shots when the target's trying to run away from you. The problem is, if the target is running away from you anywhere near the ground, you're going to really struggle to get a good radar lock here, because of the fact that the Tomcats in this game only get an HDN or Doppler mode, which means that they just really struggle to pick up targets that are actually flying away from you. So you have to switch into the normal pulse mode, or SRC, the standard search mode. But for that obviously to work, you need the target to have some kind of altitude, so you can actually have like the sky in the background and stuff like that, so you can get a rear aspect block. Now, the other missile that this plane gets is the Sedjil, or the Hawk, as a lot of people know it as. Now, this is, as far as I know, some kind of ground-to-air launched missile that the Iranians just one day decided to actually bolt onto their Tomcats because they didn't really have anything else lying around. Now, if I'm wrong about that, don't worry, because someone is going to correct me in the comments, so you can just read what they say, okay? But on a serious note though here, the Sedjil or the Hawk, it's not amazing. I haven't used it too much, to be perfectly honest with you, so my opinion might change, although I don't think it will. It's not very maneuverable. It takes a second after launch before it even starts to consider maneuvering. Then it also needs to accelerate a little bit for it to have enough, you know, grip in the air, you know, kind of like the Phoenix does. For it to move, because this thing is a heavy missile. It weighs about 3 or 4 times as much as a Sparrow, so that is also one thing to consider, meaning that you have to fire this thing off at range. Give yourself about 10 kilometers, maybe 20 kilometers or whatever, and that's kind of where its advantage lies. The problem is though, it's a Fox 1 missile, or semi-active radar guided homing, meaning that you need to maintain a solid lock, a hard lock, a single target track the entire time, meaning that the enemy is going to get that big, super loud, annoying RWR tone the entire time. And if they even decide to, you know, I mean, this isn't a difficult missile to defeat, as its G load isn't incredibly high either. It is also susceptible to multipathing, like everything else, like all other radar missiles, of course. And, you know, with the F-14 radar, if they're anywhere near the ground and they decide to even fly slightly away from you, the radar is going to drop the lock as well. So that is something that you need to, you know, you need to sort of think about. I think it's like the actual concept, the idea of the missile isn't too bad. You know, it's like this super long range missile that you can kind of keep the enemy at bay from. But with the way War Thunder works and the meta and stuff, it just doesn't sort of fit into it that well, in my opinion. And I think the other missile that you get here, well, actually there's 2 others, are just much better choices. One of them being the AIM-7E2 Sparrow, which is one of the earlier Sparrow models. It's also the same missile as the Skyflash and the British Tech Tree. And then you also get the R27R, not the ER, it's the standard R model. You get the AIM-7E2s first when you spade it, but as soon as you unlock the R27, I would recommend just switching over to that, because it's just a straight upgrade over the Sparrows in this regard. Now, if you really want to, you can take 4 extra Sparrows under the belly of the F-14, which is something that you can't do with the R27s. However, that's also where the Fakour-90s go, and I recommend you just kind of take them if you have them available. At the end of the day, the 2 loadouts that I'm going to recommend you run with here are going to be 2 AIM-9Ps, 2 R27s, and 4 Fakour-90s. It's up to you if you want to take the 2 R27s or 2 extra AIM-9Ps. However, because the AIM-9P at 12.3 really, it's very subpar, right? This is a battle rating where you're going to be facing stuff like Magic 2s, R60Ms, and the AIM-9P only being a rear aspect missile first of all, and then its performance also just not really being up to par either. I think you're just better off taking 2 extra radar missiles, and then you have the all aspect capability as well, plus their flare resistance, so that's also a thing there. Now, this is a little bit of a shorter video than what you might be used to on my channel. The fact of the matter is, the actual aircraft itself is the exact same as the F-14A early in the tech tree, and the only real difference here being the weapon systems, which I've talked about now. There's not really that much more to say about the plane here. Overall, I think this was definitely a very good event plane, definitely worth the grind. If you're thinking about picking it up on the marketplace for a decent price, I think it could be worth it as well, especially if you don't have anything in the American tech tree. Now, real quick though, I do want to mention this. If you are sort of new to the game, you don't have the American tech tree grinded out, and you're specifically thinking of buying this thing to grind out the tech tree without having to play props, then it's not going to work for you. Because it's such a high rank aircraft, you're not going to be able to research the lower ranks below that. just because of the way the RP gain penalty system works in the game. It does kind of suck, but that's just, you know, the nature of the game. However, I would, if I had to guess, I would say that we are going to probably see a premium F-14 at some point, probably fairly soon, but that's just me thinking out loud, you know, who knows. Other than that, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you are interested in a sim-orientated Discord server, my one is obviously linked in the description as always. Other than that, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.